Hi, everybody. We're just going to take a couple of minutes here. We'll just take about 30 seconds while everybody gets signed in, and then we'll get started. So just give us about 30 seconds. While we're waiting, I was just asking Kate what the weather was like in Victoria today, and she's telling me it's 15 and sunny. Not so much here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where it's about 4 degrees and rainy and cold. Okay, so we will get started. So good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us again this week for the Ocean of Opportunities webinar. This is our 6th webinar in the series, and we have struck a chord here in Canada with this webinar series. People are engaged, enthusiastic, and excited about the focus being placed on the ocean sector and startups. Projections suggest the ocean economy is expected to reach $3 trillion by 2030, which is significant growth, and we here in Canada are in the perfect position to capitalize on that growth. Now it's truly the right time to start an ocean company in Canada. Today, I'm so excited about our conversation with Dr. Kate Moran. Kate is going to talk about some of the really interesting work underway at Ocean Networks Canada, and then we will discuss the opportunities in the ocean economy and how startups and industry can work with researchers to build that ocean sector in a sustainable way. A few important notes as we get started. Our lab to market oceans applications are open. If you are a grad student, postdoc, or researcher, you need to look into this program. Rebecca will put up a link in the chat room, so apply now. As well, our challenge competition is going to launch later this month. Start developing that idea now because we want you to apply. We also want to create new connections and collisions through this webinar series. And so we have set up a Facebook group that all webinar participants are welcome to join so we can continue to interact and have those collisions. If you have an idea and need support, a co-founder, skills, or you could mentor or advise a startup, we encourage you to join the group so that you can meet those people who may be able to assist. Search Ocean Startup Project on Facebook to find us, or click the link that Rebecca has posted in the chat room. This month, we are going to be hosting a virtual event as well for people to come together and meet and connect. We hope you might find that co-founder or skill set you need to advance your startup at that time. The format for today's webinar will include a presentation from Kate. Following that, we will have an opportunity to ask her questions. This week, and technology permitting, you will be able to join us live on camera to ask a question to Kate. To ask a question, please press the speak icon on the bar on the right side of your screen, and we will invite you in to ask that question to Kate as we move through the webinar. When you get invited to ask the question, you will have to go through a couple of steps related to checking your mic, and then you will be in. Just answer yes and keep moving forward, even if it says things aren't perfect. We have found it usually works despite those messages. Once you get in, at the top of the screen in a small bar, you will see a microphone and camera icons. Please make sure both are toggled on before you ask your question. Also, while we are chatting, please be sure to introduce yourself in the chat room, explain who you are, what you do, and where you're from, and please also post your questions, and we will try to include them during the Q&A portion near the end of the webinar. I am thrilled to be joined by Kate today. Kate Moran joined the University of Victoria in September 2011 as a professor in the Faculty of Earth and Ocean Sciences and as a director of Neptune Canada. In July 2012, she was appointed the president and CEO of Ocean Networks Canada. Prior to UVic, Kate was a professor at the University of Rhode Island with a joint appointment in the Graduate School of Oceanography and the Department of Ocean Engineering. From 2009 to 2011, Kate was seconded to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, where she served as an assistant director and focused on Arctic, polar, ocean, and the Deepwater Horizon oil spill and climate policy issues. I'm gonna welcome Kate in. Kate, thank you so much for joining us. And Kate is gonna lead off with a presentation. So she's gonna share her screen with us now.
Great. Thanks so much, Don. Thanks for that introduction. So just stand by while I get the right presentation and share. So thank you all for joining. I'm really pleased to be presenting here today. And I'm going to talk about, the theme is really the blue economy, which is all about some of the world that you all work in. But I'm also going to talk about the context today, a little bit about Ocean Networks Canada, and what some of the products that we're delivering that rely on partnerships among industry, academia, ourselves, and all levels of government. So let me first talk about the current context. First, we know that the ocean does a lot for us. It absorbs CO2, 90% of life sits in the ocean, 50% of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean, 90% of the global warming heat is absorbed by the ocean. So it is our savior in terms of climate change, and it's also where we transport goods and do all those wonderful things in the blue economy. And as Don said, in 2017, the forecast was for the blue economy to triple, which was about 4% of gross world product. But it's likely bigger, and I'm going to put that in a context of what we're learning about people in terms of COVID. This is a graph showing you the increase in carbon dioxide emissions since 1900, but look at the forecast has dropped. That's an almost 5% decrease in the forecast of CO2 emissions. And so from the perspective of people and understanding climate, they're seeing a reduction in pollution in places all over the world. This reduction in pollution is related to particulates, not necessarily CO2, but concomitant with that, we will see reductions in CO2 for 2020. And people are seeing this with their own eyes. So there's a realization that the global community can act to actually do something not only about COVID, but about climate change. And so if we look at this long-term forecast of where we have to go with emissions, we know we have to decarbonize rapidly, but we also know we have to do it very, very quickly. So one of the aspects is we need to continue this reduction of CO2 at the level of what COVID is demonstrating. And so we need to look at ocean solutions for climate mitigation. That means removing CO2 from the atmosphere and stopping emissions. And we also need solutions for climate change adaptation, adapting to what we already have in the atmosphere. So those are kind of the context of why I think the blue economy will grow even further. I'll touch a little bit about ONC, Ocean Networks Canada. The motivation was about this. This is a cartoon of NASA's A-Train looks at the surface of the planet. It looks at the surface and gives you beautiful imagery like this. This is actually a model and data from the ECHO 2 satellite system, but it doesn't penetrate the surface of the ocean. So this is what we need to understand better, because it is 90% of the volume of the ocean is the sea beneath the surface. This image you're seeing is showing you the deep ocean circulation on the planet that took decades to actually understand, going out to sea over and over again. And it wasn't until the 1980s when this was really understood, after starting to try to understand the ocean in a serious way during World War II. So it was trying to understand the sea beneath the surface that motivated the development of Ocean Networks Canada. And it was not just about monitoring water and ocean circulation, as you just saw, or the biology. Circulation, animals, the interface with the continents, but also because of the fact that there's a huge dynamic seafloor, particularly here on the West Coast, with a subduction zone and venting and all that kind of thing. We need to understand all those aspects of the ocean. And that was what was the motivation for building Ocean Networks Canada, which started as telecommunication cables in the Strait of Georgia, Saanich Inlet, and then offshore the west coast of Vancouver Island. Those nodes you see, the orange squares, are nodes that connect thousands of sensors beneath the seafloor, on the seafloor, in the water column, and now we've expanded to on land to providing power and internet connectivity. So we have 24/7 data streaming in all the time. And some of the scientists on the East Coast have been using those data, as are scientists all over the world. 50% of the scientific community using this infrastructure are from outside of Canada. We can only do this because we also, at the same time, built a data system with interactive controls, broad open access, and also we're able to develop and continue to develop new internet tools for our researchers that I just talked about, educators, the public, and now, more importantly, we're also developing in partnership with the industry products that are helpful for commercialization purposes. Because of oceans too, we're able to have systems that are coming from all over the country. We have systems in the Arctic, some on the East Coast. We're working in partnership with the Marine Institute in Newfoundland. We soon will be delivering data from the radars and Halifax approaches. We used to have sensors at Force, but we're hoping to get those back up again. And we have community observatories along the west coast of Canada, in the Arctic, and soon in Churchill that will be deployed very soon. This is all based on science, but this presentation isn't about science. Most of our funding for operating this infrastructure comes from the Canada Foundation for Innovation. These are our 4 science themes. That's the discussion of those is for another day. But just to give you a few ideas about what it looks like in that deep ocean environment and what some of the science is. This is 1,300 meters of water, deep sea crabs feeding on microbes on methane bubbles. The methane bubbles hit the carapace of the crab and forms hydrates. Hydrates are lighter than water, and voila, the crabs flip upside down. And so scientists think, well, maybe they're going there for food and for fun. In terms of another environment that is really dynamic off here on the west coast, this is an image first of the nodes, those orange squares I showed you earlier. But this is the Endeavour segment of the Juan de Fuca Ridge, where 320 degrees C water is spewing out of the seafloor, and it is rich in minerals. That hot water hits the cold water, forms these giant chimneys, and then life colonizes these giant chimneys. So scientists are trying to understand the origin of life, but these chimneys are also rich in minerals, so there's an interest in mining these in the future. This is just an image of the cable, and when you're in very deep water, you don't need any protection on the cable, and this is the environment that is incredibly dynamic in terms of systems. So that was just a touch of our science. But what we do, we are doing more of is partnering with industry and bringing partnerships together with not only industry, but with academia and all levels of government for products that provide solutions for ocean safety, ocean health, and now more and more for climate solutions. So this is a list of some of the products that we're delivering in partnership. Every one of them requires a partnership either with industry, with academia, with government personnel, but I only have time to touch on one. So I'll talk about earthquake alerting, which is our most advanced product, but you can see the list here before I go on. So we know on the West Coast, there's going to be a major earthquake here in BC. The last one was January 26, 1700. We're due for it, maybe a magnitude 9. So what we've done is actually using sensors built in Canada. We've packaged them and installed them beneath the seafloor, right near the subduction zone where this major fault can slip. And we were one of the first in the world to do this with this type of sensor system. And this type of sensor system is important for doing what we call early earthquake warning. When an earthquake happens, there's two waves, primary wave, secondary wave. And the primary wave does not do any damage. So these sensors detect that primary wave, can calculate that there's an earthquake, the magnitude of the earthquake, its location and timing, and provide information to give an advanced time of before ground shaking arrives. And so we've developed this as a prototype to just to show what you could do with it. We would never be responsible for public alerting, but we're working with infrastructure operators to actually take this alerting and do automatic things to save infrastructure and to save lives. So for example, slowing down trains would stop them from derailing, getting elevators to the floor automatically, opening up fire hall doors before ground shaking destroyed the building and the fire trucks couldn't get out. The animation I'm showing you is where we have all the sensors installed, but about a year and a half ago, there was an earthquake on the Semanco Fault. We were able to test this system. And as you can see that those circles are moving at the speed of the primary wave that does not cause ground shaking, we were able to sense that wave, calculate the magnitude, and provide, if that had been a big earthquake, it would have been over a minute of time before Victoria or Vancouver actually received ground shaking. Now, we could not have done this without the algorithms from academia, the expertise from Natural Resources Canada, including their sensor systems, the know-how from the province of British Columbia, and ourselves with a very powerful data management system and the ability to install things in the seafloor. So that, again, is an example of how we can develop products in partnership with everybody who's at the table. And so we're working with, now, as I mentioned, with infrastructure to get this system advanced. In terms of ocean health, we also have other data products. One of the first ones I'll describe is noise, and that's in partnership with one of the companies that's not only located on the East Coast, but also on the West Coast, JASCO. But we're also developing products in terms of oil spill detection, detecting ocean acidification. We have a strong program in Indigenous engagement, and we're developing products that will be important for Canada to actually have tools to protect the marine environments that are going to be designated for protection. This is an animation of a hydrophone. This is not what it looked like, but this was in partnership with the Port of Vancouver and JASCO. And we built and installed in a shipping lane for the Port of Vancouver, a hydrophone system that can actually capture data to ANSI standards for ship source signatures. Now, the next two slides, they might get some feedback because it's going to be about the sound that you're hearing. So hopefully there won't be any feedback. But this is the sound of how we capture data for killer whales. And this is the sound of the data that has been captured and analyzed by JASCO. So that last sound was about JASCO actually taking the sonogram data, analyzing them, and what you're seeing here is their modeling capability to combine ship traffic data, AIS data, from our data system and from other AIS sensor systems, combining it with those source signatures that they just analyzed with, and they're able then to model, and this could happen in real time, the sound in this image, for those of you not used to the West Coast, is the Southern Salish Sea, an important data product. But again, analytics, likely JASCO's developed them with academia, us as operators, and of course their industry capability to actually move this forward. And it's important because we know that as the International Maritime Organization moves us to more sustainable shipping, the more noise in these ships, the more fossil fuels they burn. The final example I'm going to present to you is about climate solutions. Ocean renewable energy, I hope that you'll have many more discussions in this forum about the fact that the East Coast is ripe for offshore wind energy. I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about negative emissions, but there are other actions that we're working on here in partnership with others for climate solutions that are related to the ocean. So this is a stylized version of the diagram I showed earlier of how we have to cut our emissions rapidly, but there's a couple timelines. You see where above the zero, we need to stop emissions. Below the zero, we need to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere. It's a proven fact from science that we can't stay within 1.5 degrees C on the planet without removing CO2. Just a fact. Let's get over it and do something about it. So we have a program that we're doing a desk study now called Solid Carbon. It's a negative emission technology that's pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere. So capturing CO2, we're partnering with Carbon Engineering, pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere on a big offshore platform, powered by renewables, pumping that CO2 beneath the seafloor, through the water column beneath the seafloor, and into ocean crust or ocean basalt. The reason we're proposing that is because there's a large reservoir in the ocean of ocean basalt. It's ocean crust, so it's in all of the world's oceans. And the Icelandic scientists 5 years ago have demonstrated like CO2 injected into ocean crust, in their case, turn CO2 into rock within 2 years. So our next step is to try to do a demonstration of this, but one can imagine that this could become an industry of the future, in needing all of the kind of aspects of ocean technology that you are talking about on the East Coast and here on the West Coast. And it could become a new industry for Canada, and Canada could lead the world in terms of this important negative emission technology. We got started because we got funding from the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions in October. And we also submitted this to the MacArthur Foundation 100 and Change competition, which is a big long shot, but we made the top 100 in that competition. If we were lucky enough to win, we would have we'd be awarded $100 million to really move this forward. We have partners, and this list is a partial list of partners, but we're very excited about this negative emission technologies. It's ocean-based. It needs existing ocean technology and knowledge. It needs sensors that are coming from the same community. So again, like I explained in the other examples of data products, this takes the village, all of us, academia, ourselves, Ocean Networks Canada with ocean infrastructure, sensor systems, modeling, and also big effort into getting carbon capture done offshore at low cost and powered by renewables. So I just want to close by saying that I'm excited about the future. I think we're in a slump right now because of we have to focus on people's health, but there will be a stimulus. And I think with all of us, we could be a global leader in what we at Ocean Networks Canada call ocean intelligence for ocean sustainable uses. So thank you very much. And I'll stop sharing if I can figure that out here.
Thank you so much, Kate. Wow, that's an amazing presentation and a lot of incredible information for all of us. I'm watching comments in the chat room and people are totally fascinated by this. There's a lot there that I want to grab onto and talk about. But I'm going to start just with a COVID-related matter, because you talked a little bit about COVID at the beginning. And then recently there was an article co-authored by one of Dalhousie's professors here, David Barclay, talking about the reduction of noise in our oceans. And our oceans have been used more intensely probably than any time in history up until about 7 weeks ago. So I'm wondering if you could talk about the opportunity that COVID-19 is presenting to researchers and what you think the data coming out of that will show.
Well, I think that what the example you just gave is a good one, because they were able to take the data that we've been collecting over a long period of time and demonstrate that with these long data records, there's good knowledge there to actually demonstrate the better environment that exists when we actually do things more sustainably with less noise, less pollutants, less ocean acidification. So these long records that we're collecting, others are collecting in the ocean from the scientific perspective, are really a baseline that allows us to demonstrate to the public and to the politicians we need to stay in those kind of more sustainable settings.
Yeah. So in the coming back to the collaboration piece that you were talking about, just in the OECD report, Rethinking the Ocean Economy, they talk about win-win growth. And so can you talk about some of the opportunities that exist for startup companies and industry to turn profit and solve real world problems on the ocean? You talked a little bit about that, but I just want to hammer that point home.
Sure. Well, I think I'll just use ocean acidification. In the beginning, I explained that over 30% of the CO2 we put in the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels has been absorbed by the ocean. That's causing the ocean to be more acidic. Ocean acidification it can impact the whole food web, because it can corrode the calcium shell base of the food web in the ocean, but it also can impact shellfish aquaculture. And so we've developed a monitoring system that we've actually installed near one of the biggest shellfish aquaculture locations in British Columbia. So that requires sensors, analysis, possibly alerting systems. That's all from industry to inform the farmers about when they can bring certain kinds of water into their vats or however they're growing their spat, so that they can actually sustain their industry. So that's just a small example, but the one from JASCO, again, that product they have, it's really important to continue to lower the noise in the ocean. Again, it takes sensors, models, maybe alerting. All those kind of systems are really small industry products that come together for making the ocean, using the ocean in ways that don't hurt it and help us.
Yeah, it's so important. And what Ocean Networks Canada does with its data is so fascinating to me. And we're talking about startups and industry generally, and getting them on to a solid foundation really early on. So can you talk to me a little bit from a startup's perspective, if they wanted to get data from Ocean Networks Canada, how could they do that? How could they approach you folks?
So they could just get in touch with, we have a info at Ocean Networks Canada, .ca. So they could write to me, and all of our staff are on our website. Gord Weiss is basically our head of our applied science applications group. It's Gord Weiss, so you could contact him directly. Our data are all open right now. They're open for research purposes. And so companies in the development of products can use those data freely. We do have a policy that if you are making money from the data, because we're not profit, we would negotiate ways to actually have some small fee for us to actually, because we have to maintain this infrastructure. But for development, it is freely available. I'll just give you an example. This is not quite industry, but the pilots in the Port of Vancouver were interested in getting real-time data for the ocean, the currents under the First Narrows Bridge, because bigger ships were coming in and they were concerned about hitting the bridge. And we have an observatory in partnership with the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation in that vicinity. So they contacted us, and then we developed a special product specifically for the pilots. They just wanted one number, not a whole string of data that they had to analyze. So we developed a special product for them to use to actually give them information for the pilots to safely bring ships into the port.
It's great. So as a startup, you're starting out, you don't really have too many resources. There's no impediment to coming to Oceans Network Canada to ask for help and to collaborate with you folks as you start your company.
No, I mean, we have a job to do, but we're very interested in working and helping Canadian industry to be successful. Small ocean tech companies from Canada are highly successful and well regarded globally.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the relationship between academia and industry and Ocean Networks Canada, and why that is so important? You alluded to it in your presentation, but can you talk a little bit more about what that does for the sustainability of the ocean, possibly climate change, as those groups come together?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you an example about our tsunami inundation work. So in order to actually be able for towns and cities to use inundation information about how far in their town water is going to go when a tsunami happens, we brought together the world's best academic modelers so that we can get the resolution of that inundation down to meters, because it matters whether it's a school, or a road or that kind of thing. And so we developed that with this international academic community. And we then demonstrated it in Port Alberni, which is at risk for tsunami impact. And now we're working with companies to take those models and apply them other places. So a small company here we partner with, and we've applied them in Prince Rupert, in Boundary Bay, in British Columbia. We hope to do more with partners on the East Coast. And that then translates, that same approach of taking the academic base, which is trusted, is the same for storm surge. As sea level rises, particularly on the East Coast, there's got to be forecasts for where are the inundations going to be most significant? How can you plan for that? That is about reducing the costs of this kind of big climate change impact. So then again, you got to base it on scientific information, develop a product so that there's trust in it. It then can be applied for people, industry, and others to make decisions about their coastal infrastructure or their future plans and all those kinds of big important decisions. So
question for me is, innovation is advancing so rapidly. How does science keep up with that? And how do we keep it, how do we keep that innovation from getting too far out in front of science? Because there's this pressure when you're starting a company or you have a product to get it into the market really quickly. Can you talk a little bit about the balance between the speed of innovation and science working together?
Well, I actually think the basis of innovation is not necessarily getting it out there rapidly. innovation is successful with persistence. I mean, and so I'm not sure there is a competition there in terms of keeping science up to date. I do think it's important that, and this is if anyone from the Federal Innovation, Science and Industry Department is there, keep funding science, because science is the foundation of economic growth. No question about it. You just have to look, even though the United States is in a bit of a mess right now, the United States has invested in science, and that has been the driver of innovation, and other countries have copied that, Japan, Germany. So I think we just have to make sure we keep investing in science, and that will drive innovation. But if anybody has a good idea, persist. Persistence.
Yeah, persist. Exactly. So let me ask you this then. So with respect to a sustainable blue ocean economy, it seems to me that regulation obviously has a large role to play. So how do we balance the need for regulation against, the desire for meaningful, sustainable growth, and how do we balance that?
Well, I think one of the things is having smart regulations. If you look back in the United States again with the start of the Environmental Protection Agency, every time there was a new regulation about whatever kind of pollutant, innovation and economic growth happened. Because then industry had to innovate to actually develop technologies to make the environment better. So it's just making sure that we have people in the federal government and the provincial government and even locally that have scientific and technical knowledge so that those regulations really benefit those both streams, innovation and the environment. And when you do that, you have economic growth, and you're putting it in the right place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to invite Kes Morton in to ask a question to you. This sometimes takes a couple of seconds, but she should be here any minute. While we're waiting, can I just ask you, what developments are you seeing right now that you and hope for a sustainable future ocean economy?
Well, I think we need to just start developing offshore wind on the East Coast. I mean, it is ripe for it. If we can, I know that the federal government, Natural Resources Canada, has been working on making the regulatory piece easier. I haven't been following it that closely, but gosh, what a way to really do both. And again, once you start that industry, you have a support industry right there that powers your small companies, support services, and they're all sitting in the right spot. That's just one example I would love to help make happen.
That's great. I want to welcome in Kes Morton from Pisces. Thanks, Kes, for joining us. You have a question for Kate, I assume, so I'll turn it over to you.
I sure do, and I hope that you didn't answer it just now, because in that whole audio testing, I was bumped out of the room for a few seconds, so hopefully not. So I want your advice, Kate, on reconciling two facts that we know about startups and startup ecosystem, because you have a lot of experience. So the Ocean Startup Project and the Canadian federal government wants lots of startups, and they want industry to support startups. So focus on the industry support of startups. And I know that ONC has been very helpful to a lot of small businesses, but we also know that statistically, most startups fail, right? That's just the honest truth. And I like Dawn, I like this project, and at Pisces, we like to help, but it can be really quite hard and embittering to watch startups come and go and see that over and over again. I mean, sometimes it's a bit like letting your heart go over and over again, right? So as an organization that's been supporting startups for years, and in your career you've supported startups, and seeing so many fail, which I'm sure you must have, how do you stay positive in your support of startups and startup projects like the Ocean Startup Project?
Oh, well, hi, Cass.
Just a little question.
Well, I mean, that's the reality. The reason I think the government wants to support many startups is because some will succeed. The key thing about the failure part is that you learn. And that the failure part is really, really important. And so it really is about the government ensuring that even though there's failures, there's ways to get that innovators can get back on their feet and start again and learn from what the mistakes were all about. At Ocean Networks Canada, we used to have a Center of Excellence for Commercialization Research where we did a lot more with small companies, and it was wonderful. We were able to help companies by they could put their sensors on our network, and we have a way to fence off data for purposes of that, for commercial purposes, and then they could work on the sensor systems, and then when they felt it was ready for market, we could open it up for them to use the system to get faster penetration to market. So organization like Ocean Networks Canada, we can't do everything for free, but we're sitting here as a foundation that can help. And so we would love to explore this more with innovation, science, and industry to see how we could be part of that, how we could be more of a foundational piece for assisting in making that bootstrap piece work better.
So but I guess, how do you as a person, as an industry leader, as a business leader, how do you stay positive about it? I'm not going to let you off that easy, Kate.
How do I stay positive about it? I don't know. I just persist. I mean, I've worked on projects, all kinds of different ones, academia. I mean, I worked on this drilling project in the Arctic. It took a long time. I persisted at it. I just kept at it, and it worked. So, I mean, that's why I say persistence is really key, really key. If you really believe in what you're doing and persist at it, you will be successful. I'm convinced.
I think that's a really great perspective, Kate. And I think about that from a business owner perspective. I mentor other people who are starting businesses, and seeing them come and go can be so difficult. But I can also point to the successful ones in my mentoring portfolio. And I think, your advice there is to focus on those ones and to persist and build that portfolio of successful ones. Yeah. But understanding that we as a community need to be committed to having startups if we want to have our industry grow.
Yeah.
I'll go now.
And learn from this. Yeah. Bye, Ted.
Do I get kicked out or do I leave?
No, I'll kick you out.
Cool.
Thanks. So I thought it was a great question, and I think the other thing that excites me about the startup world right now is all of the resources that are in play right now in Canada that are there to assist and help. And we've got all these wonderful organizations. We've got Canada's Ocean Supercluster. We have projects like this that are really designed to help make startups successful. And the ocean economy is growing at a rapid rate. I'm going to ask you a question about the ocean economy's growth in a couple of seconds, but I have another question in the chat room that I want to make sure I get to. And the question is, it would seem that many universities have their own Ocean 2.0 like initiatives. Is there progress in standards to exchange data between these systems or universities, I guess it is the question.
Well, we're working, so Oceans 2 is not just Oceans 2 is a pretty massive data management system that we think is the best in the world, and other people come to us. But we use standard protocols to exchange data. I'm not the expert in this, but I have people who are, and we follow FAIR principles and are being compatible with, for example, the U.S. Ocean Observatory Initiative. So yes, there's ways to ensure that we're compatible. I'm not sure there's anything like Oceans 2 other places, and I would encourage those who are to contact us, because there's ways to work together to use your resources to do things like developing data products instead of duplicating something that you could use, and then put your resources into really advancing visualization or products to a client, those kind of things. So our data system is a big resource. Could be. It's something to think about. Great.
I've just invited John Maloney from JASCO. He has a question. I think he's going to be joining us in a couple of seconds here. But while he's joining us, I talked a little bit at the beginning about the growth of the ocean economy getting to $3 trillion by 2030. I think I've heard you've said it to me on the phone, and I think I heard you say today that growth could be larger than that. Can you talk a little bit about that and where you think that growth is primed to come from?
Well, I think what's been clear and demonstrated is that offshore wind is a huge growth area. And I think that that's going to be a bigger part of it, especially as North America gets on the offshore wind bandwagon. So many people know offshore wind is, hugely bigger in terms of the power potential than onshore wind, and now we're seeing that you can do it farther offshore. So that's part of it. The other part of it is that the solid carbon project I talked about, we're now in discussion with two different major offshore service industries, whereby their whole vision of the future is taking their technology and applying it for sustainability purposes. Renewable energy, carbon sequestration, blue carbon, which I haven't really talked about. Blue carbon is a growth area. And that's where you're actually growing food in the coastal zone, capturing carbon, and you're feeding people as well as reducing CO2 emissions. Those are all huge growth areas.
Mm. John, I think I can hear you. I can't see you, but are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes. There we go.
Here.
Okay, sorry about that. Kate, I just want to thank you for your kind comments with respect to JASCO. I'm not going to ask you a question. I'm going to talk a little bit about the way industry can benefit by the work of Ocean Networks Canada. It's a fantastic organization. And all this work you spoke about started because we approached Tom Dakin to basically test some hydrophones on the Venus network. And that's how it cascaded from there. We put some arrays of hydrophones on the Venus network. That test was successful and was interesting. That led to us developing tracking algorithms to do spatial tracking of vessels and southern resident killer whales. We took that technology and we developed that capability to do it on autonomous sensors. That led to tomography experiments with NRL, ONR scripts, HUI. We've been able to commercialize that. We've put those systems down the eastern seaboard as part of the ADION program, and we're about to take that same technology and put it into Boundary Pass as part of the ULSs. So we've been able to take what was initially a really simple experiment on the Venus network, and we've been able to make that a huge commercial success. And ONC has been instrumental in allowing us to do that. So I just want to pass the compliment back to you that you've said a couple of nice things about JASCO. ONC and the work that the staff at ONC did to help us along that path has been tremendous.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Thanks for joining. Folks, if you don't know JASCO, have a look at, Google it. It's a remarkable company that started out of Nova Scotia. It's bi-coastal, it's international now. A really, really impressive company doing really, really impressive things. And, there's another reason to be excited to start up in the ocean sector. You've got an organization like JASCO that has worked with Oceans Networks Canada and has effectively had a lot of success through that collaboration, and those are available here in Canada and Atlantic Canada. So it is a really interesting time to start up. I have a question from David Crombie in the chat room here, Kate, and it's around wave power. And the question is wave power a white elephant, or will it ever be profitable? So lots to dig through there.
I'm not an expert in wave power, but if you look at the three big the power sources in the ocean, offshore wind, waves, and tides, wind is at the earliest stages of development. It's a tough one. There's really the power potential is the lowest, but it could be a niche market, a niche place where you have good wave energy and you need to have power to remote communities. That's my personal opinion. I think the investments should really be in offshore wind. The machines are getting giant. It's proven. The ability to transmit power through DC cables is there. And it's a known resource. So I think if we're going to invest in something now, it would be offshore wind.
So other than offshore wind, over the next 10 to 20 years, what else do you think drives growth in the ocean sector?
Well, as I said, blue carbon. I mean, that's all the way from agriculture to new growth there's a company here in British Columbia that will possibly be the biggest producer of kelp in Canada, because most of the kelp that's been produced is harvesters, and so they're actively developing farms, and so that's just another example. And we have the longest coastline in the world, and so this could be another piece of the negative emissions and feeding the world. And wow, aren't we well positioned to actually take advantage of that?
So I know Ocean Networks Canada is undergoing a 10-year plan right now. Can you talk a little bit from your perspective on what the future holds for ocean observation?
Yes, I mean, what we're interested in expanding infrastructure. One of the areas that we're really interested in pursuing, and we haven't, I'm persisting, but we haven't been successful yet, is the telecom industry. So all of the internet connectivity that we use is 90+% from telecom cables around the world's oceans. And there's plans to start laying them in the Arctic. There's a whole community of scientists and engineers trying to work with telecom industry to put sensors either adjacent to or with repeaters on those telecom cables. Simple ones: pressure, temperature, and acceleration. With that kind of expansion, we would have the entire planet wired. We would understand better about, in terms of temperature, we don't know enough about deep ocean temperature that we need to know in order to forecast the future climate. Again, forecasting the future climate means we can understand how it will impact our coastal zones, impact all those kinds of things that impact our society. Accelerometers for understanding earthquakes better. And the pressure data will just be important for actually feeding back into big weather systems, because you'll be able to actually measure large parts of the ocean height in terms of how it's either wind driven, etc. So those simple sensors installed in, we're trying to push for that. It's still, it takes the industry to have a light bulb go on. We're trying to make that happen. That's just one example.
How do you make that happen, Kate? Obviously, if you knew the answer, we would still not be looking to have the light bulb turned on. But what sort of techniques do you use to try and get industry to turn that light bulb on?
I talk as much as I can to chambers, business organizations. I do cold calls. I write to Elon Musk every year. He hasn't answered yet. I try not to be shy about it. Persist. I just try to persist.
I did a similar thing just on this Ocean Startup project. I randomly wrote you, and you actually did reply, which I was thrilled about, and agreed to come on this webinar. So I appreciate where you're coming from with that. Quick question for you on Canada, and how is Canada performing in relation to other jurisdictions in terms of collecting and sharing oceans data and information?
In terms of the federal government, they got a ways to go. They have a mandate for open data, but it's a big challenge because a lot of the data collected by federal scientists, some of it's stranded, but they're trying hard with the development and investment in the Canadian Integrated Ocean Observing System. And so that's a wonderful example of Canada stepping up to the plate with other Western countries who already have integrated ocean observing systems. So it's a challenge. Our data are all open. Our philosophy, I hope others will follow. And people always think it's just the cost of a sensor, but there's a whole lot of other costs associated. So we go through an incredible workflow before we plug anything in terms of the data, the systems, all of that. So when we plug it in, data flows and no data gets stranded. So as many people know in the data world, once you strand data, it costs multiple times the money to get it to be accessible. So I just hope others will start following our philosophy, so then we get data out there openly. Because the more open data there is, the better the economy. It's been proven.
Who's doing it really well out there, Kate?
Pardon me?
What jurisdictions are doing it really well in terms of sharing that data and collecting that data?
Oh, I think NASA's doing an awesome job. No, I mean, there's some big U.S. organizations that have been at the forefront of this. At Oceanetics Canada, we're really good at it. Yeah, if we're good, but NASA's kind of the platinum member of the club, I would say.
I hear a lot of talk about the Arctic and opportunities in the Arctic for both research but commercialization. Can you talk to me a little bit about the Arctic and where you see there being some opportunities for industry and startups?
Yeah, I think there's we have a couple small observatories in the Arctic, and it's important for communities in the Arctic to have technology to understand the changes in their own community. So that's one area that will take government support, but certainly we know, like our observatory in Cambridge Bay, Nunavut, because we have sea ice thickness, a sensor that was built by an ocean tank company here on Vancouver Island, that the community uses those data to make decisions in their own community about whether or not to go out hunting on the ice, etc. So we're going to have to get technology in the hands of communities in the Arctic for them to adapt to climate change. But in terms of the other aspects of it, certainly with the Arctic Ocean opening up, there's going to be a growing need for ocean technologies to monitor ship traffic, be able to respond to accidents, having better communication, all those kinds of aspects that we have on other coasts that just don't exist there. And improving the communication system is probably the number one foundational piece that would help all of those pieces work better in the Arctic. We've been interested in actually working with others to install an observatory in the Arctic with other countries, because the Arctic Ocean is changing faster than any other place on the planet. And again, we haven't had any takers yet, but I'm putting it out there. Anyone wants to partner with us on proposals to put a cable observatory out of alert to the North Pole, call me.
So I'm going to finish with this question, and I've finished with this question before, and I don't know what your answer is going to be. So I'm hoping it's in line with what I'm looking for. But why get into the ocean sector right now? Why would you do it? Why would you take the leap into the ocean sector at this time in 2020?
Well, I think right now with COVID-19, the world has to decarbonize. And as I've just described, there's a huge range of decarbonized opportunities in the ocean space. And so we need to influence government to invest in the stimulus. Governments are going to invest in stimulus to get economies going. And they have to be of the decarbonization type. And there's huge opportunities in the ocean for that, as I've talked about. So right now it's perfect timing to do it, but we all have to make sure we keep the pressure on government to really launch an initiative in the blue economy for Canada. World's longest coastline, great technological base. We already have the cohort to make it happen. So I think it's, I mean, even though COVID is really sad and bad, with the stimulus coming, this is another real reason to do this.
Yeah, incredible opportunity right now. I have one more question I want to ask you, because it's in the chat room, and I think it's a great platform for ONC to finish on. But the question is from Aaron Bent, and it's given that we need to make sure our oceans are healthy, is Ocean Networks Canada involved in research with regards to coral bleaching and other factors affecting healthy oceans?
Yeah, we don't have any sensor systems in areas of, well, sorry, I shouldn't say cold water corals. There are glass spongeries, et cetera, that we have been monitoring and providing data for. And we have long-term data in terms of the health of the areas that we have monitoring. So for example, if people probably on the East Coast haven't followed the warm blob in 2015, So the top 200 meters of the Pacific Ocean warmed by 2 degrees C. It affected North America's climate, wildfires, agriculture. It was a huge impact on the economy. But we were monitoring, and now what we started to see, we had warmer waters in the coastal areas. Again, that impacted the fact that there's less nutrients, impacting less fish. So we're able now to use that data, as scientists are, as information to help us understand how we possibly can adapt to future extreme warming events like this. So yes, we're monitoring all aspects of the health of the ocean, and acidification is at the top of our list, and we're working with a company in Nova Scotia on the sensor systems to get them more. They're probably the best company in the world for measuring ocean acidification, and we want to work with them to get it to be the best in the world, because every place in the world is going to have to monitor ocean acidification.
What company is that, Kate? Just
It's commercialize is the company.
okay. Kate, I could probably ask you questions all day long, and we only have this hour, so just a big thank you. I'm going to just do a quick run through on the Ocean Startup Project, and then we'll come back and say a formal goodbye, but this has been really, really fascinating. All right, so folks, the Ocean Startup Project. So the purpose of the Ocean Startup Project is to generate more startup companies in Canada. And so what we've got here is an unprecedented regional collaboration between 6 Pan-Atlantic organizations and the Ocean Supercluster. So we have Genesis out of Newfoundland, we have Innovacorp, we have NBIF, New Brunswick Innovation Fund, PEI BioAlliance, we have Springboard Atlantic, and Creative Destruction Lab, who have come together with the Ocean Supercluster to try and create more ocean startups in Canada. And it's a really aggressive 24-month project to do that. So what is the vision? The vision is for Canada to be the best place in the world to launch and grow an ocean company. And we believe that with proper focus and collaboration from coast to coast to coast, Canada's ocean ecosystem will be the best place in the world to launch and grow an ocean company. We've talked a little bit about the things in the ecosystem right now that are making it a great place to start a company. We've got Canada's Ocean Supercluster investing $300 million into the ocean economy. This project, the Ocean Startup Project, is investing close to $7 million to foster the creation and growth of startup companies. We've got government organizations investing money, the stimulus that Kate was talking about. We've got IRAP, we've got ACOA, we've got ISED, we've got all of these different organizations and provincial organizations as well who are investing in the ocean sector right now. So this is a really bold vision, and it is time we get bold in our ocean pursuits in Canada, and we are surrounded by these incredible resources. So we really think now is the time, and this is the place to start an ocean company in Canada. The opportunity that we see is when we look at the ocean economy in Norway and its strength, we see a huge opportunity for Canada. Norway's ocean economy in 2018 was about $132 billion annually. Canada's $20 billion annually. Kate mentioned that we have the largest coastline. We have 4 times the coastline of Norway. We have 7 times the population. So we think with the right focus on the ocean, we can narrow that gap pretty quickly. So the potential for Canada's ocean economy is amplified by these incredible resources that we've talked about. And all across Canada, we have organizations that are providing support and opportunities in the ocean space. You see the names on this slide. They are just a tiny sample of what can be leveraged here in Canada. You have Ocean Networks Canada. We've got the Marine Institute. We've got Cove, where I am. We've got the Association of British Columbia Marine Industries. There are so many different organizations that are looking to help advance the ocean economy here in Canada. In Atlantic Canada specifically, we have some incredible supports available to entrepreneurs, including the partners in this project. along with organizations like Propel ICT, Volta, Ignite, Planet Hatch, Emergence, Startup Zone, PEI, Venn. And those are just a few of the organizations that want to help support innovators from idea phase onward. And so the Ocean Startup Project is going to collaborate with all of these organizations as best we can to help support those starting out along the way. So things that we have coming up. So I want to highlight a couple of the exciting projects that we are launching. This is the Ocean Startup Challenge, and it launches this month. And so we've gone out and we've asked industry for their feedback, and we've received feedback now from industry, and we're working on our challenge statements. The trends that are emerging from what industry has said to us are really, really interesting. So later this month, we're going to ask startups from across the country and internationally to provide solutions to these industry challenges. You'll have 8 to 9 weeks to prepare and submit a response once the challenge is launched. And then 10 companies are going to be selected to receive $25,000 for a sprint. At the end of that, the winners, we're going to have winners, and the winners will be finalists for up to $1,500,000 prizes at the end of this project. The other thing that we have on the go is Lab to Market. And if you're a Canadian researcher, postdoc, grad student, or PI in an ocean or oceans related field, you should apply to Lab to Market. This program is designed to assist you in building, testing, and developing a business model centered on research and its potential for commercialization. And we heard Kate talk about the need for that collaboration and the supports that are available all across the different networks here in Canada. So I think in these uncertain times, there's an opportunity for these postgrads, grad students, and PIs to receive up to $15,000 in funding to learn new skills and get assistance with the development of an idea. So we're only accepting 20 teams, and we really want you to get your applications in now. The deadline to apply is May 31st, and you can visit labtomarket.ca for more information. So finally, folks, we just want to stay in touch with you. Here are the ways that we can stay in touch. So please reach out to us if you have ideas, if you have any questions about the project. We would love to talk to you at any point along the way. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, today for joining us, and a special thanks to Kate. I think if we collaborate across provinces, territories, and disciplines, we have a huge opportunity in Canada to build a stronger and more sustainable ocean economy. We can do this, but only if we work together and break down some of those barriers that exist. I want to thank Natasha and Rebecca, who make all of this work on a daily basis. They work tirelessly on a weekly basis to make these webinars happen. We will be back on May 21st. And we'll be speaking with Dr. Russ Kerr, who is a well-renowned academic in the field of marine natural products and biotechnology. In addition, Russ co-founded Nautilus Biosciences Canada in 2007, a marine microbial biotech company focused on the discovery of novel natural products and other biomolecules. Nautilus, his company, was acquired by Croda, obviously a large multinational, in 2018, and Russ is now a research fellow with Croda. He has lived Lab to Market, and his story is really, really fascinating. So next week, we are hosting an information session and Q&A for Lab to Market program, for our Lab to Market program. So anyone interested in learning more, please click on the link posted by Rebecca. Lab to Market is such a big opportunity. We would love to see you join us for that information session. So the other thing is we would love to stay connected. We talked a little bit about connections. So join our Facebook group, apply to Lab to Market, look for our challenges as we move forward. The ocean sector is alive and well in Canada, and this is the place to really, really take advantage of it. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Kate. And I really know how valuable your time is. And so we're really, really pleased you take the time to join us on a weekly basis. And if I can ask you anything, please talk to everyone you can about the energy and excitement that surrounds the ocean sector in Canada. We will make this the best place to start and grow ocean economies in the world, ocean companies in the world, if we do this together. So Kate, thank you again. Really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, happy to do it.